You think the car crash is what broke my ribs first? You are wrong. The first thing to shatter was the delusion that my mother would come running. I was strapped to a gurney with blood on my fingertips. When she called, she did not ask if I was alive. She only asked why her card was declined for $3,950. In that moment, I realized I was not her daughter. I was just a credit limit with a heartbeat. My name is Everly Fisher. I am 33 years old, and the first thing I realized when I opened my eyes was not that I was alive, but that the ceiling tiles of St. Elwyn Medical Center needed dusting. It was a strange, detached thought, floating in the sterile air like the dust motes dancing in the harsh fluorescent light. Then the pain arrived. It did not creep in. It slammed into me like a freight train, a crushing, suffocating weight centered squarely on my chest. Every breath was a negotiation with my own rib cage. I tried to inhale, and my body screamed in protest. A sharp, jagged agony that radiated from my sternum out to my shoulders. I blinked, trying to clear the fog in my brain. There was a rhythmic beeping sound to my left, the steady, mechanical reassurance that my heart was still beating. Even if I felt like it had been torn out and stomped on, I looked down. My clothes were gone, replaced by a thin, rough hospital gown that smelled of bleach and industrial detergent. There were wires snaking across my chest, tucked under the fabric, and an IV line taped securely to the back of my hand. The tape was pulling at the fine hairs on my skin, a tiny, irritating sting amidst the ocean of larger pain. I remembered headlights. That was all. Two blinding orbs of white light cutting through the rain. Crossing the center line, the sound of metal screaming against metal, the world spinning. Then, nothing. I tried to sit up, but a firm hand pressed on my shoulder. A nurse. I could not see her face clearly, just a blur of blue scrubs. She said something about staying still, about scans, about concussion protocols. Her voice sounded underwater. I closed my eyes again, fighting the nausea that rolled in waves from the base of my skull. Then, a sound cut through the medical haze. It was a vibration, angry and persistent, rattling against the metal side table next to my gurney, my phone. The screen was cracked. A spiderweb of fractures ran diagonally from the top left corner to the home button, refracting the light into tiny rainbows. I reached for it. My fingers felt thick and clumsy, and there was dried blood, my blood, caked under my fingernails. It looked dark, almost black, against my pale skin. The movement sent a fresh spike of fire through my side, but the instinct to check, to connect, was stronger than the injury. I expected to see a lot of things. I expected to see a missed call from my husband, maybe a frantic text from my best friend. I expected concern. I expected love. What I saw was a name that usually triggered a reflex of anxiety in my gut. Marlene, my mother. There was a text message sitting on the lock screen. The timestamp showed it had arrived 2 minutes ago. I squinted through the cracked glass, my eyes watering from the effort. Don't be dramatic. Transfer $3,950 right now. My card just got declined at the airline counter, and these people are incompetent. I stared at the words. I read them once, then I read them again, then a third time. The words did not change. There was no, "Are you okay?" There was no, "I heard about the accident." There was no, "I am coming to the hospital." There was just a demand, a command, and an accusation of drama. I was lying on a gurney in a trauma bay, my ribs likely fractured, my head pounding with a concussion, my car probably a twisted heap of scrap metal on the side of the highway, and my mother was worried about being dramatic. The phone buzzed again in my hand, making my numb fingers tingle. Another message from Marlene. "Seriously, Everly, fix it now. They are holding my luggage. I am standing here like an idiot. It is humiliating. Humiliating." That was the word she used. Not terrifying, not tragic. Humiliating, because her credit card had bounced. My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, but it came out as a choked, dry cough that tasted like copper. I was not a person to her. I was not a daughter. I was a wallet, I was an infrastructure. I was the server that kept her lifestyle online. Suddenly, another notification slid down from the top of the screen, momentarily covering Marlene's demands. It was from the automated system at my son's school. Miles has been picked up safely by Dad. The air left my lungs in a rush, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was relief. Pure, unadulterated relief. Miles was safe. He wasn't in the car. He was with his father. He was okay. I looked at the two messages stacked on top of each other. The contrast was so sharp it felt like it could cut skin. One message was about safety, about the most precious human being in my world being secure. The other was about $3,950 for a business class upgrade. My mother did not ask if Miles was in the car. She did not ask if her grandson was alive. She did not care. She was annoyed because the little plastic card in her hand had failed to give her what she wanted. And she assumed I was the mechanic who needed to come fix the engine. I waited for the tears. I waited for the heartbreak. I waited for that crushing sense of betrayal that usually accompanied Marlene's narcissism, but the tears did not come. The heartbreak did not arrive. Instead, a cold, hard sensation settled over me. It started in my chest, right where the steering wheel had impacted, and spread outward to my limbs. It felt like ice water replacing my blood. It was clarity, absolute, crystalline clarity. I work in the medical technology field. At Astorvale MedTech, we deal in precision. We deal in diagnostics. When a patient is bleeding out, you do not stand there and weep about the unfairness of the universe. You do not bargain with the wound. You identify the source of the hemorrhage, and you clamp it. You stop the bleeding. If you don't, the patient dies. I looked at the phone. I was the patient. My mother was the hemorrhage. I took a breath. It hurt, but I welcomed the pain now. It sharpened my focus. I unlocked the phone, ignoring the jagged glass that snagged the skin of my thumb. I did not open the messaging app. I did not reply to her. I did not type out, "I am in the hospital," or "I almost died." I knew, with a sickening certainty, that if I told her I was in the hospital, her response would not be concern. It would be annoyance that my hospitalization was inconvenient for her travel plans. I swiped over to the finance folder on my home screen and opened the app for Crescent Ridge Bank. The familiar blue and white logo flashed on the screen. Face ID failed because of the swelling on my cheekbone, so I had to type in my passcode. My fingers were shaking, but I forced them to be steady. 1984. Enter. The dashboard loaded. I saw my checking account. I saw my savings. And then I saw the section that had been the bane of my existence for 9 years. The section that my mother had manipulated me into setting up when I was 24 years old. Fresh out of college and desperate for her approval. Overdraft protection link. Underneath it, in bold letters, authorized guarantor. Marlene Kincaid. Next to her name was a small, pulsing green dot. The word active was written in bright, cheerful green letters. That green dot was the umbilical cord. That green dot was the reason she had never learned to budget. That green dot was the reason she felt comfortable booking business class tickets when she only had coach money in her account. She knew that if she swiped her card and the funds weren't there, the system would seamlessly, silently reach into my account, take what was needed, and cover her mistake. She called it a safety net. I realize now, lying in that hospital bed, that it wasn't a safety net. It was a hammock she had been lounging in for nearly a decade. While I held up the trees, I tapped on the authorized guarantor tab. The screen changed. It showed the history. The list of transfers was a mile long. $500 here, $200 there, $1,000 last month for a wellness retreat. And now, she was trying to pull nearly $4,000. My thumb hovered over the menu button. I found the option I was looking for. It was buried deep in the settings, designed to be hard to find, but I knew exactly where it was. Manage access. I clicked it. A new screen popped up with a warning message. Revoking guarantor status will immediately decline any pending transactions that exceed the account holder's balance. This action is immediate and cannot be undone without a new authorization form. Are you sure? I looked at the warning. I thought about the $3,950. That was months of mortgage payments. That was Miles's tuition for his summer camp. That was my blood, sweat, and time, traded away so she could drink champagne before takeoff. I thought about her text. Don't be dramatic. Okay, Mom, I whispered. My voice was raspy, barely a sound. I won't be dramatic. I'll be practical. I pressed the button marked Revoke. The app paused for a second, the little loading wheel spinning. It felt like the longest second of my life. I held my breath. Then, the screen refreshed. The cheerful green dot was gone. In its place was a dull, lifeless gray circle. The word active had been replaced by the word revoked in neutral. Unfeeling gray text. It was done. I locked the phone and let it drop onto the metal tray beside me. The clatter sounded loud in the quiet room. I closed my eyes and let my head sink back into the thin hospital pillow. The pain in my ribs was still there. A hot, throbbing presence. But there was something else now, too. A strange sense of satisfaction. I let my mind travel out of the hospital room, out of the sterile air, and across the city to the airport. I imagined the scene. I pictured Marlene standing at the check-in counter. She would be wearing her oversized sunglasses, tapping her foot impatiently. She would be holding her platinum card, the one that looked impressive but was actually hollow. I imagined the airline agent, a tired woman who had been dealing with entitled passengers all day. I imagined her typing on her keyboard. I imagined Marlene sighing, checking her watch, waiting for the transaction to clear so she could snatch her boarding pass and march toward the lounge. And then, I imagined the silence. The beep wouldn't come, or rather, the wrong beep would come. The sharp, dissonant tone of a decline. The agent would look up, perhaps with a flash of pity, perhaps with hidden satisfaction. She would say the words that Marlene feared more than death. I am sorry, ma'am. The card has been declined. The issuer is not authorizing the overdraft. Marlene would freeze. She would demand they run it again. She would insist it was a mistake. She would say, "My daughter covers this. Run it again." But the machine did not care about daughters. The machine only cared about ones and zeros, and I had just turned her one into a zero. The queue behind her would start to grumble. People would shift their weight, checking the time. Marlene, who prided herself on being above the common inconveniences of life, would be the cause of the bottleneck. She would be the person holding up the line because she couldn't pay. The heat would rise in her cheeks. The facade would crack. For the first time in 9 years, the consequences of her spending would not flow downhill to me. They would pool right there at her feet. I lay there in the emergency room, listening to the steady beep of my own heart. It was a lonely sound, but it was strong. I was broken. Yes, my bones were cracked. My car was destroyed. But for the first time in my adult life, I was free. I took a breath, deeper this time, fighting through the pain. The hemorrhage was clamped. Now, the surgery could begin. The morphine drip began to do its work, turning the sharp edges of my broken ribs into a dull, rhythmic throb. But as the physical pain receded, it made room for a different kind of ache, one that no pharmaceutical could touch. It was the ache of memory. My mind drifted away from the sterile white tiles of the trauma bay, floating back on a tide of chemical haze to a Tuesday afternoon 9 years ago. I was 24 years old. I was sitting in a booth at a bistro that was slightly too expensive for my budget, across from a woman who looked more like a movie star than a mother. Marlene was glowing. She had ordered a bottle of Pinot Noir that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and she was pouring a glass for herself with a flourish that commanded the attention of the entire room. I had just landed my job at Astorvale MedTech. It was an entry-level position, junior analyst. But to me, it felt like I had conquered the world. I was going to have a salary. I was going to have health insurance. I was going to be an adult. Marlene raised her glass. Her nails were freshly manicured, a deep, blood-red crimson. She smiled, and for a second, I felt that warm, desperate glow in my chest, the glow of being seen by her to this day. I can remember her exact words. They were not aggressive. They were soft. They were textured like velvet, designed to wrap around you and keep you warm while they slowly constricted your breathing. She told me she was proud. She told me that we were a team. She told me that now that I was stepping into the real world, we needed to modernize our relationship. She called it structuring our success. Then came the pitch. It was so subtle I didn't even hear the trap snap shut until years later. She said that since I was traveling for work, and she was managing the house, a house I didn't own, a house she insisted on keeping despite the crushing mortgage, we needed a safety net. She used that specific phrase, a safety net. She said that sometimes cash flow was tricky for her with her freelance consulting, and since I had a steady paycheck now, we should link our accounts, just for emergencies, she said, just to prevent the embarrassment of a declined card at the grocery store. She looked at me with those wide, glistening eyes and asked if I wanted my mother to be humiliated over a carton of milk. I said no. Of course I said no. I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to be the good daughter. So, we went to the bank the next day. I sat in the leather chair, feeling important, and signed the paper. It was an overdraft protection link. It meant that if her checking account hit zero, the bank would automatically pull funds from my account to cover the difference. No fees for her, no declined transactions, just a silent, invisible transfer of wealth. I thought I was signing a document to help my mother. In reality, I was signing a warrant for my own financial execution. That was the beginning of the grooming. Financial grooming is not something people talk about often. We talk about emotional abuse. We talk about physical abuse. But we rarely discuss the slow, methodical training of a child to view their own resources as community property. It didn't start with flights to Europe. It started small. $50 here for a utility bill she forgot. $70 there for a dinner she accidentally put on the wrong card. Every time it happened. My phone would ping with a transfer notification, and every time Marlene would call me, she would be effusive. She would say, "Oh, Everly, thank goodness for you. You saved the day." And there it was, the dopamine hit. You have to understand my childhood to understand why I didn't cut the cord then. Growing up, Marlene's love was not a constant light. It was a spotlight. It was dark most of the time, but if you performed well, if you got straight A's, if you cleaned the house before she got home, if you fixed a problem she had created, the spotlight would swing onto you. You would be bathed in warmth and praise. You would feel worthy. I was trained like a seal in a circus. Perform the trick, get the fish, fix the financial mess, get the affection. Over 9 years, the safety net stopped being a net. A net is there to catch you if you fall. This became a hammock. Marlene climbed into it, lay back, and let me hold the ropes. The amounts grew. The $50 utility bills turned into $300 spa treatments, then $500 dinners, then luxury handbags. I never said no. I couldn't. Every time I thought about bringing it up, a paralyzing fear seized my throat. I was terrified that if I mentioned the money, the spotlight would turn off. I was terrified she would call me ungrateful. I was terrified she would say the words she used to say when I was a child. "After everything I sacrificed for you." Lying in the hospital bed, I let the cold, hard numbers drift through my mind. I am a data analyst. I find comfort in data sets. So, I did the math. $3,950 was the request today. But that was not an anomaly. That was the average. I closed my eyes and let the equation run. $3,950 a month. Sometimes it was a little less, sometimes much more. But that was the baseline burn rate for being Marlene Kincaid's daughter. Multiplied by 12 months, multiplied by 9 years. That is 108 months. 3,950 multiplied by 108. $426,600. The number hit me harder than the airbag had. $426,600. That was a house. That was a fully paid-for college education for my son. Miles. That was a retirement fund. That was freedom. I had not just bought her groceries. I had bought her a life. I had bought her the illusion of wealth that she wore like a coat, while I shivered in the cold, working 60-hour weeks, driving a car with high mileage, checking coupon apps before I went shopping. And it wasn't just the cash. As I dug deeper into the memory, I remembered the other thing, the thing I had pushed to the back of my mind because it felt too complicated to untangle. About 4 years ago, Marlene had come to me with a new scheme. She was starting a consulting firm. She called it MK Consulting. She said she needed to build a business credit history. She asked me to be an authorized user on her business credit card. "It will help your credit score, Everly," she had said, touching my arm. "It is a win-win. We build the family portfolio." I agreed. I signed. But looking back now, with the clarity of a woman who has just revoked her own mother's access, I saw the truth. She didn't add me to help my credit score. She added me because her own credit was radioactive. She needed a cosigner with a pristine history to even get approved for the card. She had leveraged my good name, my hard work, my diligence, to open another line of credit that she could drain. I was not a partner. I was a host organism. I realized then that I was not stupid. That is the first thing victims of financial abuse tell themselves, that they were idiots, that they should have seen it. But I wasn't stupid. I was programmed. I was a piece of software that Marlene had been coding since I was 5 years old. Input: mother is distressed. Output: fix it. Input: mother needs money. Output: provide it. Input: mother is happy. Output: feel safe. The code had run perfectly for 33 years. It had run without a glitch, until today. Until a guardrail and a wet road smashed the hardware and forced a reboot. The nurse came in to check my vitals. She adjusted the IV bag. Her movements efficient and brisk. She looked at the monitor, then at me. "Heart rate is up a little," she said softly. "Try to relax." I nodded. But I couldn't relax. My brain was on fire with the revelation. I thought about Miles, my sweet, 6-year-old boy. I thought about how I taught him to share his toys. I thought about how I hugged him even when he made a mess, even when he broke things. I never charged him for my affection. I never sent him an invoice for his existence. That was love. Love was giving without expecting a return on investment. Marlene viewed me as a venture capital project. She had put in the time raising me, the seed capital, and now she expected her dividends. She believed she was entitled to that $426,000. In her mind, that wasn't theft. It was her return. I felt a tear finally leak out of the corner of my eye, sliding hot and fast down my temple into my hair. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of mourning. I was mourning the mother I never had. I was mourning the fantasy of the safety net. I had spent my entire adult life building a fortress to keep her safe, brick by expensive brick, and the moment I needed shelter, the moment I was the one bleeding and broken, she didn't offer me a room in that fortress. She just banged on the door and demanded I pay the heating bill. I whispered into the empty room. My voice sounded strange, foreign, like it belonged to a woman I was just meeting for the first time. "I am not keeping a family," I said to the air. "I am maintaining a system designed to extract value, a system designed to consume." I looked at my hand, the one with the IV tape. I flexed my fingers. They were still mine. My mind was still mine. The bank account was finally mine again. The realization settled deep in my gut, heavier than the internal bleeding, but far more necessary. I knew what I had to do next. I knew the war that was coming. Marlene would not go quietly. You do not cut off a parasite without the parasite fighting to reattach itself. She would scream. She would guilt. She would send lawyers. But for the first time, I had the ultimate weapon. I had the truth. I closed my eyes. The image of the gray, revoked button burning behind my eyelids like a holy symbol. If love is real, I thought, letting the darkness of sleep finally pull me under, it does not need a pin. The nurse's name was Nina. I read it on her badge while she was checking the flow rate of my IV. She had kind eyes, the sort of eyes that had seen too much trauma to be easily shocked. But what I was about to ask her would test that professional composure. "Nina," I said. My voice was stronger now, fueled by the adrenaline of the decision I had just made. But I kept it low. "I need you to help me do something. It is going to sound strange." She paused, her hand hovering over the plastic tubing. "If it is about leaving against medical advice, honey, you can forget it. Your ribs are a mess and your blood pressure is unstable." "No," I said. "I do not want to leave. I want to stay. But I need to change the room." I took a shallow breath, measuring the pain. "I need you to pull the blinds. I need you to lower the volume on the heart monitor so it is barely audible. And I need you to put a sign on the door." Nina frowned, tilting her head. "What kind of sign?" "Restricted visitation, immediate family only, critical condition." She looked at me, then at the monitor which showed a steady, albeit elevated, heart rate. "You are stable, Everly. Banged up? Yes, but you are not critical. Why do you want your family to think you are dying?" "Because," I said, looking straight at the cracked ceiling tiles, "if they think I am awake, they will argue with me. If they think I am dying, they will try to bypass me." I turned my head to look at her. "And I need them to try." It took a moment for her to understand. She worked in a trauma center. She knew that not every injury walking through those doors was physical. She saw the cracked phone screen. She likely saw the lack of visitors. She nodded. A sharp, decisive movement. "I will get the patient advocate," she said quietly. "If you are staging a scene, you need a witness who isn't medical staff to document the interaction." I could have hugged her. "Thank you." 10 minutes later, the room was transformed. The harsh fluorescent lights were dimmed to a twilight gloom. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor was turned down to a soft, almost subliminal pulse. I lay back against the pillows, closing my eyes, letting my features go slack. I pulled the oxygen mask back over my face. It wasn't strictly necessary anymore, but it was a prop. It created a barrier. It made me look fragile. It made me look voiceless. The stage was set. Now, I just had to wait for the actors. My phone buzzed again on the metal tray. I didn't need to look to know who it was, but I checked anyway, shielding the light so it wouldn't ruin the dim atmosphere. "Fix it now. They are holding my luggage. I'm standing here like an idiot. This is humiliating." I did not reply. 2 minutes later, another buzz, longer this time, a threat. "If this is not resolved in 10 minutes, I am coming down there. Don't think I won't." I smiled beneath the plastic cup of the oxygen mask. The mist from my breath fogged up the clear plastic. She was coming. Of course she was coming. She wasn't coming to hold my hand. She wasn't coming to pray by my bedside. She was coming because the ATM was broken, and she needed to kick it until it started dispensing cash again. I motioned for Nina. She stepped close to the bed. "Is there a camera in the hallway?" I asked. "Yes, right outside the door, covering the nurses' station and the trauma bays." "Flag it," I whispered. "Tell security to preserve the footage from the next hour. Mark it for potential legal review." "Legal review?" Nina raised an eyebrow. "What do you think is going to happen?" "Coercion," I said. "They are going to try to make me sign something, or they are going to try to sign something for me, and I want it in high definition." Nina's expression hardened. She didn't ask any more questions. She just walked out to the station and picked up the phone. I had one more call to make. This one was the most important. I scrolled past Marlene's contact. I scrolled past my sister Tessa. I found a number I hadn't dialed in months, not because I didn't love the man on the other end, but because Marlene had made it so difficult to maintain a relationship with him. Walter Fisher, my grandfather, my father's father. My father had died when I was 7, leaving me with Marlene. Walter had tried to stay involved, but Marlene had pushed him away, calling him judgmental and stingy. The truth, I later learned, was that Walter was a forensic accountant. He spent 40 years looking at spreadsheets and finding the lies hidden between the numbers. Marlene hated him because he was the only person she couldn't charm and couldn't fool. The phone rang 3 times. Everly? His voice was gravel and oak, steady, unsurprised. He didn't sound like a man who had been woken up. He sounded like a man who was already waiting. "Grandpa," I said. My voice cracked, and for the first time, it wasn't an act. Hearing his voice made the reality of my isolation hit home. "I am in the hospital. St. Elowyn." "I know," he said. "I got a notification. Are you safe?" "I am alive," I corrected, "but I'm not safe." I took a deep breath, wincing as my ribs protested. "Grandpa, I revoke the authorization. On the bank account, the overdraft link." I cut her off. There was a silence on the other end, a heavy, loaded silence, then a long exhale. "It is about time, kid." "She is coming here," I said. "Her card got declined at the airport. She is coming, and she is bringing Tessa, and probably that lawyer she dates, Grant. They are coming to the room." "What do they want?" "They want to turn the tap back on," I said. "And if I am incapacitated, or if they can claim I am incapacitated, they will try to claim emergency guardianship." Walter finished the sentence for me. His tone shifted. The warmth of the grandfather evaporated, replaced by the cold, sharp steel of the auditor. "They will claim you are mentally compromised due to head trauma and painkillers. They will try to execute a power of attorney to manage your assets for your protection." "Yes," I said. "That is what I think." "Everly," Walter said, "listen to me very carefully. Do you remember the summer you turned 21? The summer you stayed with me at the lake house?" "Yes." "Do you remember the paperwork I made you sign? The day we went to the notary in town? You were annoyed with me. You said I was being morbid." I paused, searching the archives of my memory. I remembered that summer. It was the only time I had escaped Marlene's orbit for more than a week. I remembered the dusty office of the notary public. I remembered Walter sliding a thick stack of papers across the desk, just in case. He had said, "Life is unpredictable. Evie, you need a backup plan that isn't your mother." I had signed it without reading it closely. Trusting him implicitly, I thought it was a will. "I remember," I said. "That wasn't just a will," Walter said. "That was a durable power of attorney. It activates the moment you are deemed incapacitated, and it names me as your sole agent, not Marlene." My breath hitched. "You knew?" "I knew she would drain you dry eventually," he said. "I knew a day would come when you would be vulnerable, and she would be hungry. I couldn't stop you from giving her your money while you were awake. Everly, you were an adult, but I made damn sure she couldn't touch you when you were asleep." A shiver went through me. He had played a game of chess against Marlene for 12 years, and he had made his winning move a decade ago, before she even knew the game had started. "Grandpa," I whispered, "they are going to be here any minute." "Let them come," Walter said. "Let them dig their hole. I am 20 minutes away. I am bringing the file. Don't sign anything. Don't say anything. Just breathe. Okay? And Everly?" "Yes?" "You are doing good." You finally stood up. The line clicked dead. I dropped the phone back onto the bedsheet and slid it under my leg, hiding it. I adjusted the mask. I closed my eyes. The room was silent, save for the low, rhythmic hum of the machinery. I slowed my breathing, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3, then I heard it. It started at the far end of the corridor, past the nurse's station. It was a distinctive sound, not the squeak of rubber-soled nursing shoes, not the heavy thud of work boots. It was the sharp, staccato click of high heels striking hard linoleum. Click, click, click. It was a fast, angry rhythm, an approaching storm. I heard voices raised in the hallway. A nurse saying, "Ma'am, you cannot go in there." And then Marlene's voice, shrill and piercing, cutting through the hospital quiet like a serrated knife. "Get out of my way! That is my daughter. I have rights. I let my body go limp. I let my jaw slacken slightly. Beneath the sheets, I clenched my fists so hard, my nails bit into my palms. The door to my trauma bay burst open. The curtain rings screeched across the metal track as they were ripped back. The air in the room changed instantly. The scent of antiseptic was overpowered by a wave of expensive, cloying floral perfume. "Oh my God," a voice said. It wasn't Marlene. It was Tessa, my sister. Is she dead?" "She is not dead. You idiot. Look at the monitor," Marlene snapped. Her voice was close, too close. I felt her presence right beside the bed. "She is just out of it." I felt a hand grab my wrist. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a grip. Marlene's fingers were cold, and her rings dug into my skin. She wasn't holding my hand to comfort me. She was checking to see if I would pull away. I didn't move. I forced every muscle to remain flaccid. "Grant, look at this," Marlene hissed. "She is completely out." The nurse said head trauma. "This is perfect." "Keep your voice down," a male voice said. Smooth, oily. Grant Halverson, the lawyer. "If she is non-responsive, we move to the emergency protocol. We need to establish that her current state prevents her from managing her financial obligations. I need that transfer to go through." "Grant," Marlene whispered, and I could hear the panic edging into her tone. "They are going to release my booking in 30 minutes. "Relax, Marlene," Grant said. I heard the rustle of papers being pulled from a briefcase. "We just need to get the biometric consent to unlock the device. Then I can execute the temporary guardianship override. It is standard procedure for comatose patients." Standard procedure. He was talking about hacking into my life while I lay there bleeding. "Grab her other hand," Marlene commanded. "She needs to sign the digital pad." "She can't sign. Mom, look at her," Tessa said, sounding disgusted but compliant. "Then we help her," Marlene said. "It is for her own good. She would want me to handle things. She always wants me to handle things." I lay there in the dark, listening to them rewrite my reality. They were not family. They were vultures circling a carcass. Annoyed that the meat wasn't falling off the bone fast enough, I felt the tablet screen press against my fingertips. "Come on," I thought, my heart rate remaining deceptively slow thanks to the breathing techniques I used for anxiety. "Come a little closer. Put your fingerprints all over the crime scene." The trap was set. The bait was taken. And in the hallway, unseen by the predators looming over my bed. The red light of the security camera blinked silently, recording every frame. The commotion outside my room was not a conversation. It was a siege. From my vantage point on the bed, feigning unconsciousness, I could hear the distinct, piercing frequency of my mother's voice vibrating through the drywall. It was a tone I knew better than my own heartbeat. The tone of a woman who believes the universe has made a clerical error by inconveniencing her. "I do not care what your protocol is," Marlene was shouting. "I am her mother. I birthed her. Do you understand? That creates a biological right of entry that supersedes your little clipboard." I heard a softer voice, likely the receptionist or a nurse, trying to interject, but Marlene steamrolled over her. "She is in there alone. She is hurt. And you are keeping her family out? I will have your job. I will have this entire hospital sued for emotional distress before the sun goes down." It was a performance. It was always a performance. But what chilled me was not the volume. It was the lack of fear. A mother terrified for her child's life sounds frantic, broken, breathless. Marlene sounded annoyed. She sounded like she was disputing a charge on a hotel bill, not fighting to see her injured daughter. Then came the sound of the door swinging open. It didn't open tentatively. It was shoved. 3 people entered my trauma bay. I didn't need to open my eyes to know exactly where they stood. The scent of Marlene's perfume, Chanel and Cold Ambition, filled the small space instantly, choking out the smell of antiseptic. Then came the smell of stale cigarette smoke and expensive leather, which meant Grant Halverson was to my right. And finally, the faint, sugary scent of vanilla body spray. Tessa. Jesus, Tessa muttered. She looks terrible. She looks stabilized, Grant corrected her. His voice was low, professional, and entirely devoid of warmth. The monitor shows a steady rhythm. The sign on the door says, limited visitation and critical condition. That is actually good for us. Good? Tessa asked. How is it good that she is half dead? Because it establishes incapacity, Grant explained smoothly. I could hear the click of his briefcase latches opening. If she were awake and arguing, this would be a negotiation. Since she is comatose, or at least heavily sedated, it is a rescue mission. We are not taking her money. Tessa. We are stepping in to manage her estate because she physically cannot. I lay perfectly still, focusing on the slow rise and fall of my chest. My ribs screamed with every micro-movement, but I forced my facial muscles to remain slack. I was not a person to them right now. I was an obstacle that needed to be bypassed. Look at this, Marlene said. I felt her hand brush my forehead. It was not a caress. She was pushing my hair back to get a better look at my face. Checking for consciousness the way one checks a melon for ripeness. She is out cold. The nurse said they gave her opioids for the pain. She won't wake up for hours. Perfect, Grant said. I have the papers ready here. This is the emergency financial guardianship petition. And this is the durable power of attorney activation. Since we do not have a signed copy on file, we are going to execute a digital affidavit of consent. Is that legal? Tessa asked. She sounded bored, shifting her weight from foot to foot. I could hear the rustle of her jacket. It is a gray area, Grant admitted, his voice dropping an octave. But given the family relationship, and the fact that we are acting to prevent financial default on her obligations, no judge is going to look too closely. We just need to establish that she consented to the transfer of authority before she lost consciousness, or that we are acting as her emergency proxies. Just get it done, Marlene snapped. The airline is holding the seats for another 20 minutes. If I lose that upgrade, Grant, I am going to be very unhappy. I am on it, Grant said. I need her thumb. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my concussion. They were going to use my own body against me. I felt Marlene's hand grip my wrist. Her fingers were tight, digging into the soft flesh of my forearm. She lifted my hand. It was limp, heavy. I let her move it. I had to let them think they had won. Her hand is dirty, Marlene complained. There is dried blood on her fingers. It won't read on the sensor. Clean it, Grant ordered. I felt the cold, wet shock of a sanitation wipe against my thumb. Marlene scrubbed. She scrubbed hard. She was rubbing away the evidence of my trauma to make way for her transaction. The friction burned against my skin. But I didn't flinch. I floated in the darkness behind my eyelids, recording every sensation, every word, every betrayal. You know, Tessa said, her voice drifting closer. She is always so dramatic. Even when she gets in a wreck, she has to make it a huge production. Now we are stuck here in this depressing room instead of at the lounge. Focus, Tessa, Marlene said. Okay, the thumb is clean. Grant, bring the tablet. Booting up the biometric interface, Grant said. Okay, here is the plan. Once we unlock the phone and the banking app, I am going to not only reverse the revocation of the guarantor status, but I am also going to initiate a sweep. A sweep? Marlene asked. We are moving the primary funds, Grant said. If she wakes up and tries to block us again, it will be too late. I am going to transfer the bulk of her liquid assets into the Kincaid Family Trust. We will label it Protective Custody of Assets Due to Medical Instability. It makes us look like the good guys. We are protecting her money from being lost while she is confused. Smart, Marlene said. God, I love it when you are smart. And, Grant added, and this was the moment the air left the room for me. I found that other account she was hiding. My heart hammered against my ribs. What other account? The one at the credit union, Grant continued. She named it Miles Future Fund. It has $25,000 in it. The world stopped. The Miles Future Fund. That wasn't just money. That was every birthday check, every side gig payment, every tax refund I had saved for 6 years. That was my son's escape hatch. That was the money meant to ensure he never had to rely on people like Marlene. I had opened it at a completely different bank. I had opted out of paper statements. I had never spoken its name aloud. 25,000? Marlene sounded offended. She told me she was broke last Christmas. She said she couldn't afford to buy me that bracelet, and she had $25,000 sitting in a credit union? She has been holding out on the family, Grant said, his voice dripping with false righteousness. That is proof of financial mismanagement right there. Hiding assets creates a lack of transparency. We are justified in taking control. Take it all, Marlene hissed. Transfer that one first. That is my money. I raised her. I fed her. That money belongs to the family pot. I will need to authorize a separate transfer for that one, Grant said. It has a 2-step verification, but if we have her phone and her fingerprint, we can bypass the security question. Do it, Marlene said. I felt the hard glass of a tablet screen press against the tip of my thumb. Okay, Grant murmured, positioning the sensor. Marlene, hold her finger steady. I need a clear print to authorize the durable power of attorney signature. I have got it, Marlene said. She squeezed my thumb, forcing it flat against the glass. Initializing scan in 3, Grant counted down. 2. The rage that surged through me was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was not hot. It was cold. It was absolute. They were not just stealing my present. They were stealing my son's future. They had crossed the line from parasites to predators. They thought I was a helpless victim lying in the dark. They thought I was a broken thing to be harvested. But they had forgotten one thing. They had forgotten that I was the one who managed the books. I was the one who knew the passwords. And I was the one who had invited them into this room. 1, Grant said. I did not move yet. I waited for the beep. I waited for the system to register the attempt. I needed the timestamp. I needed the digital footprint of the theft. Beep. Authorized, the robotic voice of the tablet announced. Signature accepted. Got it, Grant said, triumph soaking his voice. Now, let's get into the banking app. Hurry, Marlene urged. I want to see the balance. They were huddled over me now. 3 heads bowed in worship of a glowing screen. Their backs to the door. Their attention entirely focused on the digital loot. They felt safe. They felt powerful. They had no idea that the camera in the hallway was capturing the back of Marlene's head as she held my limp hand. They had no idea that the patient advocate was standing in the shadows of the nurse's station, writing down every word of their conspiracy. And they had no idea that the woman in the bed was not asleep. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs despite the pain. It was time. The tablet screen was hovering inches from my face, a glowing portal to my financial destruction. Grant's hand was guiding mine, his grip slick with sweat, positioning my thumb for the second scan, the one that would unlock the banking app and expose the Miles Future Fund. Almost there, Grant whispered, his breath smelling of stale tobacco. Just hold still, Marlene. I am holding it, my mother snapped, squeezing my wrist hard enough to bruise. Just press it. The pad of my thumb was millimeters from the glass. I could feel the heat radiating from the device. They were so close. They were so confident. They thought the woman in the bed was a corpse they could loot before the funeral. I didn't just move. I exploded. With a surge of strength that I didn't know I possessed, I yanked my arm back. The motion was violent, tearing my wrist from Marlene's grip and sending her stumbling backward. Her high heels scrambled for purchase on the linoleum, and she grabbed the edge of the instrument tray to steady herself, sending a metal kidney dish clattering to the floor with a deafening crash. I didn't wait for them to recover. I ripped the oxygen mask off my face, the elastic band snapping against my cheek, and threw it aside. I forced myself upright. The pain in my chest was blinding. a white-hot spear driving through my torso. But I rode the wave of agony. I let it fuel me. "Get your hands off me!" My voice wasn't weak. It wasn't the voice of a victim. It was a guttural roar that bounced off the tiled walls and filled the small room. Grant froze. He stood there with his arms still extended, holding the tablet in midair like a shield. His mouth hung open, his eyes wide and unblinking behind his rimless glasses. He looked like a deer caught not in headlights, but in the crosshairs of a rifle. Marlene recovered first. She stared at me, her chest heaving, her face twisting from shock into something ugly and defensive. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are faking!" she shrieked. It wasn't relief that I was awake. It was an accusation. "You were pretending, you little snake. You were lying there listening to us." "Yes," I rasped, fighting the urge to cough because I knew it would shatter my ribs. I was listening. I heard every single word. I turned my head toward the corner of the room, to the shadowed alcove by the door where the curtain had been partially drawn. "Did you get that?" I asked loud and clear, from the shadows. A woman stepped forward. It wasn't Nina, the nurse. It was a tall woman in a gray suit, holding a clipboard and a digital recorder. The patient advocate. Nina had summoned her exactly as I asked. "I have it all recorded, Ms. Fisher," the advocate said, her voice calm and professional, cutting through the chaos like a scalpel. "The coercion, the physical manipulation of your limbs, the admission of intent to transfer funds without consent, it is all here." Grant whipped around. Seeing the witness for the first time, the color drained from his face so fast he looked like he was about to faint. He lowered the tablet slowly, trying to hide it behind his back, a reflex of a guilty child. "Now, wait a minute," Grant stammered, his smooth, lawyerly baritone cracking. He held up a hand, palm out. "Let us not jump to conclusions. This is a misunderstanding. We were acting in her best interest. It is a standard emergency protocol." He turned to me, putting on a smile that looked like it was painted on rotting wood. "Everly, you are confused. You have a concussion. You are on strong medication. We were just trying to protect your assets while you were incapacitated. We were worried about your bills defaulting." "Protect me?" I laughed, a dry, harsh sound that tasted of blood. "You were going to protect me by draining the account I set up for my son?" I reached down and grabbed my phone from where I had hidden it under my thigh. I unlocked it, my fingers still shaking, but accurate, and pulled up the message thread. "Do you want to hear how worried my mother was?" I asked the room. I looked at the patient advocate. "This is the text message my mother sent me while I was being wheeled into this room, while I was bleeding." I held the phone up, reading the words aloud, enunciating every syllable. "Don't be dramatic. Transfer $3,950 right now. My card just got declined at the airline counter and these people are incompetent." I lowered the phone and looked Marlene dead in the eye. "You did not ask if I was alive," I said. "You did not ask if Miles was safe. You asked for money, and when I didn't give it to you, you came here to take it." Marlene's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She straightened her jacket, trying to regain her composure, trying to summon the imperious matriarch she had played my whole life. "I was stressed, Everly," she yelled. "I was at the airport. I had people staring at me. Do you know how humiliating that is? To have a card declined? I thought you were just being petty. I didn't know you were actually hurt." "You knew I was in the hospital when you walked through that door," I countered. "And you didn't cry. You didn't hold my hand. You grabbed my thumb and tried to hack my bank account." "We were helping you," Tessa chimed in from the corner. She looked annoyed, crossing her arms over her chest. "God, Everly, why do you always have to make everything so difficult? If you do not sign the transfer, Mom loses the upgrade. She loses the flight. She will die of embarrassment. Do you want that on your conscience?" I looked at my sister. She was 26 years old, but in that moment, she looked like a toddler demanding candy. "Die of embarrassment," I repeated slowly. "That is your defense? I am lying here with broken bones, and you are worried about her reputation at an airline counter? It is not just about the flight, Tessa said, rolling her eyes. It is about the principle. You owe her. She raised us. That is enough, Grant interrupted. Sensing that Tessa was digging the hole deeper, he stepped toward the bed, trying to loom over me, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me back into submission. Everly, look, let's be reasonable. The advocate here doesn't need to file anything. We can settle this as a family. You are clearly emotional. Just sign the authorization. We will clear up the overdraft, and we will leave you to rest. We will even keep the money in the trust. Just like I said, totally safe. I stared at him. He really thought I was that stupid. He thought he could pivot from theft to negotiation in 10 seconds flat. Grant, I said softly, you mentioned the Miles Future Fund. You said you were going to transfer it. I was going to secure it, he hedged. You can't, I said. He blinked. What? You can't transfer it, I said. Even if you had my thumbprint, even if you had my passcode, even if you had my Face ID, I leaned forward slightly, ignoring the screaming protest of my ribs. Did you really think I would leave my son's money unprotected? I asked. Did you think I didn't know who you people are? I looked at Marlene. 6 months ago, when I opened that account, I went into the branch. I sat down with the manager, and I set up a specific security protocol. It is called a beneficiary lockdown. Grant frowned. There is no such banking term. There is at that credit union, I lied. Or maybe I wasn't lying. I didn't care. I needed them to feel the wall closing in. I set up a secondary authentication phrase. Any transfer over $500 and any change to the beneficiary status requires a verbal confirmation with a specific phrase. A phrase only I know. A phrase that is not written down anywhere. I saw the realization hit Grant. He knew about two-factor authentication, but he hadn't expected a manual override. And do you know what else I did? I continued, my voice gaining strength. I set up a trigger. If 3 failed biometric attempts occur, which happens when someone tries to force a fingerprint on a scanner, the account locks down, it freezes, and it automatically sends a fraud alert to the account holder's emergency contact. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. My emergency contact for that account is not you. Mom, it is not you. Tessa. Who is it? Marlene demanded, her voice shrill. It is the fraud department of the IRS, I said. That was a bluff, a massive, glorious bluff. But in the panic of the moment, with the patient advocate standing there recording everything, they didn't know that. They just heard IRS and fraud and record. Grant looked like he was going to be sick. He dropped the tablet onto the bed. You are crazy, he whispered. You are actually crazy. No, I said. I am awake, finally. I looked at the 3 of them. My mother, the narcissist, my sister, the enabler, the lawyer, the predator. You were planning to touch Miles's money, I said. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. You were going to take the $25,000 I saved for his college, and you were going to use it to buy first-class tickets and pay off your credit card debt. You were going to eat his future. It is family money, Marlene screamed, losing all control. She lunged forward, but the patient advocate stepped in between us, blocking her path. I am the family. I decide where the money goes, you ungrateful little brat. After everything I did, I gave you life. And now you are trying to charge me for it, I said. I will sue you, Marlene yelled, her spit flying. I will declare you incompetent. I will take Miles. I will tell the court you are a drug addict. You can try, the patient advocate said calmly. But this recording will be Exhibit A. Marlene spun around to face the woman. Get out of my way. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, the advocate said. You are a person who just committed attempted elder abuse and financial fraud in a medical facility, and I am calling security." "You don't need to call security," a voice said from the hallway. The door to the trauma bay, which had been left slightly ajar, was pushed open all the way. It wasn't a violent entrance. It was slow, deliberate, heavy. Walter Fisher stepped into the room. He was wearing his old trench coat, the one that smelled of rain and pipe tobacco. He looked older than I remembered, his hair completely white now, but his posture was as rigid as a steel beam. He held a thick manila envelope in his left hand. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Tessa. He looked straight at Grant Halverson. The room went deadly silent. Even Marlene stopped screaming. Walter walked into the room, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the floor. Tap, step, tap, step. He stopped at the foot of my bed. He placed the envelope on the tray table, right next to the tablet Grant had dropped. "Hello?" "Marlene," Walter said. His voice was low, devoid of emotion, like a judge reading a sentencing. "Walter," Marlene hissed. "Get out. This is a private family matter." "You are right," Walter said. "It is family. That is why I am here." He turned to Grant. "Mr. Halverson," Walter said, "I believe you are holding a durable power of attorney document that you were about to execute." Grant swallowed hard. We were just exploring options." "I see," Walter said. He tapped the envelope he had brought. "That is unfortunate, because this envelope contains the original, notarized, durable power of attorney that Everly signed 12 years ago. It grants me sole decision-making power in the event of her incapacitation, and it explicitly revokes any future claims made by her mother." Walter looked at Marlene. "You are 12 years too late, Marlene." He looked back at Grant. "And you, sir, are about to be disbarred." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc, waiting to drop, and for the first time since the crash, the pain in my chest felt manageable, because I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The cavalry had arrived, and he was armed with paperwork. The room did not just go quiet. It went into a state of suspended animation. The arrival of Walter Fisher had sucked the oxygen out of Marlene's hysteria and Grant's arrogance, replacing it with a density that felt like lead. Walter did not come alone. Flanking him were 2 uniformed security guards, their hands resting loosely but attentively on their belts, and a woman in a sharp navy blazer who radiated the terrifying authority of hospital administration. She wore a badge that read, "Director of Risk Management." My grandfather walked past Marlene as if she were a piece of furniture that had been placed inconveniently in the hallway. He did not look at her. He did not look at Tessa. He walked straight to the bedside table, where Grant's tablet and papers were scattered, and he placed a thick manila envelope down on the metal surface. The sound it made was heavy. It was the sound of a gavel hitting a block. Thud. "You can put your pen away, Mr. Halverson," Walter said. His voice was not loud. It was conversational, almost pleasant, which made it infinitely more terrifying. It was the voice of a man who had already read the audit report and found the embezzlement. "There will be no signatures collected today." Grant blinked, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. He looked at the security guards, then at the risk manager, then back at Walter. "Who are you?" "I am the person who is going to prevent you from losing your license," Walter said. "If you stop talking immediately," Marlene stepped forward, her face a mask of indignation that was rapidly cracking to reveal the fear underneath. "This is my father-in-law. He has no standing here. He is not immediate family. I am the mother. I am the next of kin. Officer, please remove him." She turned to the security guards, flashing her most charming, victimized smile. "He is estranging us. It is a family dispute." The guard didn't move. He didn't even blink. The woman in the navy blazer stepped forward. "Mrs. Kincaid, I am Mrs. Sterling, the hospital administrator. We have been monitoring the situation in this room for the last 15 minutes via the security feed and the report from our patient advocate." Marlene stiffened. Then you saw my daughter having a mental breakdown. She is confused. We saw 3 individuals attempting to force a patient under the influence of intravenous opioids to execute legal and financial documents. Mrs. Sterling said. Her tone was like dry ice. That is a violation of federal patient rights statutes, state medical consent laws, and frankly, it is grounds for immediate criminal referral. Grant Halverson let out a noise that sounded like a balloon deflating. He quickly shoved the unsigned papers back into his briefcase. Now, look, Mrs. Sterling, that is a harsh characterization. We were simply consulting with the patient. No documents were signed. No harm, no foul. Attempted fraud is still fraud, Grant, Walter said. He tapped the thick envelope he had placed on the table. Open it, Walter commanded. Grant hesitated. Open it, Walter repeated. Grant reached out with a trembling hand and undid the clasp. He slid the documents out. I craned my neck to see. I knew what they were, but seeing them there, in the physical world, felt like seeing a shield materialize out of thin air. That, Walter said, pointing to the document on top, is a durable power of attorney. Everly and I updated it 2 years ago, shortly after she started the new savings account for Miles. It is notarized, it is filed, and it contains a specific clause that triggers immediately upon any medical event requiring hospitalization of more than 24 hours. Walter turned to look at me for the first time. His eyes were soft, crinkling at the corners, but when he turned back to Marlene, they were hard as flint. It designates me, Walter Fisher, as her sole agent for all financial and medical decisions, Walter continued, and it specifically revokes any implied authority of parents or siblings. Marlene stared at the paper. 2 years ago? She whispered. She looked at me, betrayal written all over her face. You signed this behind my back? While we were having Sunday dinners? While I was helping you pick out curtains? While you were spending my rent money on shoes, I corrected her, my voice raspy but steady. This is a forgery, Marlene spat, reaching for the paper. She would never do this. You tricked her. The notary log is indisputable, Walter said. But that is not the only thing in the envelope. He reached past Grant and pulled out a second sheet of paper. It was a fax confirmation sheet. You see, Walter said, addressing the room but focusing his attention on Grant. When Everly called me, she told me about the text message. She told me about the airline ticket. I knew exactly what you would do. You are predictable. Marlene, you always panic, and you always grab for the nearest wallet. He held up the fax confirmation. This is a notice of revocation and a freeze request, Walter said. I sent it to the fraud department of Crescent Ridge Bank and the credit union holding the Miles Future Fund exactly 14 minutes ago. I also sent a copy to the legal department of the airline you were trying to fly with. Marlene's mouth fell open. You called the airline? I told them that the credit card used to book the initial ticket was under investigation for authorized user abuse, Walter said calmly. I believe they have probably canceled your entire itinerary by now. You are not going to Europe. Marlene, you are not even going to the airport parking lot. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a lifestyle collapsing. Grant Halverson was the first to realize the ship had not only sunk, but was already on the ocean floor. He clicked his briefcase shut. He adjusted his tie, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. Well, Grant said, his voice tight, it seems there are competing legal documents here. This is a matter for a probate court, not an emergency room. I think we should all take a step back and let the lawyers handle this in the morning. He looked at Marlene. I am going to head out. Marlene, call my office on Monday. You are leaving? Marlene shrieked. You are my lawyer. Do something. Fight him. I cannot fight a valid, durable power of attorney with a blank tablet and a biometric violation. Grant hissed at her. He has the paperwork. He wins. Let's go. Not so fast, Walter said. Grant froze halfway to the door. The hospital administrator mentioned a criminal referral. Walter said, I believe the police are currently on their way to take a statement from the patient advocate. If you leave now, Mr. Halverson, it might look like flight. Grant went pale. He looked at Mrs. Sterling. Security will escort you to the waiting room. Mrs. Sterling said, You can wait for the officers there. Grant didn't argue. He looked like a man who just wanted to vanish. He nodded sharply and walked out, escorted by one of the guards. That left Marlene and Tessa. Marlene stood by the bed. She looked smaller now. The rage was still there, but it was hollow. She looked at the envelope, then at me. You are doing this to punish me, she said. Her voice trembled. Because I wasn't motherly enough on the phone? Because I was stressed? You are ruining my life over a tone of voice? I am not punishing you, I said. I am firing you. I am your mother, she screamed. The sound was so loud it made the monitor spike. You cannot fire your mother. I own you. I made you. You did not make me, I said. You made a bank account, and now it is closed. You have no right, she yelled, spinning toward Walter. She is my daughter. You have no right to come in here and take her from me. Walter stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He had the absolute, crushing weight of the truth on his side. I did not ask for the right, Marlene, he said. He looked down at me, and for a second, the grandfather and the accountant merged into one terrifyingly protective force. My granddaughter gave me the right, Walter said. She gave it to me when she was lucid. She gave it to me because she knew that when she was weak, you would be the predator, and she was right. He turned to the remaining security guard. Please remove them, Walter said. Everly needs to rest. No, Marlene grabbed the bed rail. Her knuckles were white. I am not leaving. Tessa, do something. Tessa, who had been standing in the corner like a ghost, finally spoke. She looked at the tablet on the bed, then at the envelope, then at her mother. Mom, Tessa said softly. Stop. Don't you tell me to stop, Marlene snapped. He has the papers. Mom, Tessa said. And I don't want to go to jail. Grant is already in trouble. I am leaving. Tessa walked to the door. She didn't look at me. She just walked out. Tessa! Marlene screamed. You coward! The security guard stepped forward. He was a large man, and he didn't look amused. Ma'am, he said, you can walk out, or I can carry you out, but you are leaving this room. Marlene looked at the guard. She looked at Walter. She looked at the empty doorway where her lawyer and her other daughter had fled. Then, she looked at me. I expected hate. I expected venom. But what I saw was something pathetic. I saw a woman who realized that for the first time in 33 years, the PIN code didn't work. The transaction was declined. She straightened her jacket. She smoothed her hair. She tried to summon the dignity of the victim. You will regret this, she said to me. When you are better, and you need me, and I am not there, you will regret this. I have been regretting you for 9 years, I whispered. I think I will be fine. She turned on her heel. The security guard opened the door for her, not as a courtesy, but as an eviction. She walked out into the bright hallway, the clicking of her heels sounding frantic and uneven. The door closed. The latch clicked. The silence that rushed back into the room was profound. It wasn't empty silence. It was clean silence. Mrs. Sterling, the administrator, nodded to Walter. I will make sure the police report is filed. Mr. Fisher, and I will ensure that no visitors means absolutely no visitors without your direct approval. Thank you, Walter said. Mrs. Sterling left, closing the door softly behind her. It was just me and Walter. He stood by the bed for a long moment, his hand resting on the envelope. He looked at the monitor, checking my heart rate, which was finally starting to slow down. You okay, kid? He asked. I hurt, I said. Everywhere. I know, he said. He pulled the chair over, the one Marlene had refused to sit in, and sat down. He leaned his cane against the nightstand. But the bleeding has stopped, the financial kind. Anyway, did you really call the airline? I asked. Walter smiled. It was a small, dry smile. I called them before I even called the hospital. I figured if I couldn't beat her to the room, I could at least beat her to the gate. I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. Thank you, Grandpa. Don't thank me yet, he said, his face growing serious again. This was the easy part. The legal paperwork is just the shield. Now comes the investigation. We have to dig through the last 9 years, Everly, and what we find. It isn't going to be pretty. Marlene isn't just bad with money. She is criminal with it. We are going to find things you didn't know existed. I know, I said. I thought about the MK Consulting account. I thought about the hidden fees. I am ready. Good, Walter said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a pair of reading glasses. He opened the envelope again and pulled out a notepad. Because while you rest, I'm going to start building the timeline. The IRS is going to want a clear picture of when the gifts stopped and the theft began. I watched him work. He was methodical. He was calm. He was everything my mother wasn't. For the first time since I saw headlights crossing the center line. I closed my eyes and didn't see the crash. I saw a balance sheet, and for the first time in my life, the numbers were finally adding up in my favor. The next 3 days in the hospital were not spent resting. They were spent conducting an autopsy. But we were not dissecting a body. We were dissecting a decade of financial cancer. My grandfather, Walter, treated my hospital room like a command center. He had his laptop open on the tray table, a stack of legal pads balanced on his knee, and a thermos of black coffee that he refilled from the cafeteria every 2 hours. I lay in the bed, propped up by pillows, an iPad in my lap. My ribs still throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, but the pain was distant now. It was background noise. The foreground was occupied by the horrifying clarity of the numbers on the screen. We were reconstructing the crime scene of the last 9 years. It is a strange thing to look at your life through the lens of a bank statement. You see the rhythm of your existence reduced to debit and credit. You see the coffee you bought on a rainy Tuesday. You see the gas you put in your car to drive to a job you hated. But in my case, I saw something else. I saw the parasite. Look at this pattern in 2018, Walter said, adjusting his reading glasses. He didn't point with his finger. He used the cap of his pen. Tapping the screen of his laptop. Every 3rd Friday of the month. See it? I squinted at the spreadsheet he had compiled. Transfer out, $300. Transfer out, $450. Transfer out, $300. It lines up with her hair appointments, I said, my voice flat. She goes to that salon in the city, the one that serves champagne. And here, Walter continued, November 2019, a series of withdrawals labeled Huas transaction, grocery, but the amounts are consistent, $200 exactly, 4 times a week. She doesn't eat $800 of groceries a week. Grandpa, I said. No, Walter agreed. But the grocery store offers cash back at the register. She was buying a gallon of milk and pulling out the maximum cash allowance. It bypasses the ATM fees. And on your statement, it just looks like food. It is money laundering for suburbanites. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my medication. It was the intimacy of the theft. She hadn't just taken big chunks. She had shaved me down, layer by layer, day by day. It was death by 1,000 cuts, disguised as domestic expenses. But the real horror show started when we dug into the fintech apps. Walter had subpoenaed the records from the MK Consulting account that Grant Halverson had mentioned. Since my name was on the account as a guarantor, I had the legal right to view the transaction history. It took us 3 hours to get into the back end of the system, because Marlene had set up the security questions with answers only she would know. But she had forgotten that I knew her better than she knew herself. Favorite pet? Barnaby, the cat she gave away because he shed on her velvet sofa. City of birth? She always lied and said Chicago, but it was actually a small town called Joliet. When the dashboard finally loaded, Walter and I sat in silence for a full minute. "My God," Walter whispered. It wasn't just a consulting account, it was a funnel. Marlene had set up 2 shadow accounts linked to this main hub. One was labeled Operations, and the other was labeled Retainer. I clicked on Retainer. The screen filled with a list of outgoing payments. They were monthly, they were automatic, and they were going to a recipient named Halverson Legal Strategies, LLC, $500 a month, every month, for 4 years. She was paying him, I said, the realization landing like a physical blow. She was paying Grant. "Consulting fees," Walter read from the memo line. He let out a sharp, cynical laugh. "She was paying her boyfriend a salary using your money, and in exchange, he was likely advising her on how to restructure her debt so it fell on you. It is a kickback scheme, Everly, pure and simple." "He knew," I said, "when he was standing here in this room, holding that tablet, talking about protecting my assets. He knew exactly where the money was going because he was the one catching it." It changed everything. This wasn't just a toxic mother. This was a conspiracy. Grant Halverson wasn't just a sleazy lawyer. He was an accomplice to embezzlement. He had a financial incentive to declare me incompetent because if I cut the cord, his monthly stipend dried up. "We have them," Walter said. He didn't sound triumphant. He sounded grim. He picked up his phone. "I am not just sending this to the bank fraud department. This is going to the State Bar Association." "Wait," I said. "I want the rest of the evidence first." I rang the call button. When the nurse came in, I asked for the risk management director, Mrs. Sterling. She arrived 10 minutes later, looking crisp and efficient. She held a small, encrypted USB drive in her hand. "The footage?" I asked. "And the audio transcript," Mrs. Sterling said, placing the drive on my bedside table. "The patient advocate's report is attached as a PDF. It is comprehensive." I plugged the drive into the laptop. We watched the video in silence. It was grainy, black and white, shot from the ceiling angle in the hallway, but it was clear enough. I saw Marlene grabbing my wrist. I saw Grant hovering over me with the tablet. I saw the way I yanked my hand back. I saw the panic on their faces when I sat up. But the audio file from the patient advocate was the nail in the coffin. Grant Halverson. "Just get the biometric consent. I can execute the temporary guardianship override." Marlene Kincaid. "Transfer $3,950 right now. Die of embarrassment." Tessa Kincaid. "If you do not sign, Mom loses the upgrade." It was all there. The intent, the coercion, the complete lack of concern for my well-being. "This converts a family dispute into a felony," Walter said, closing the laptop. "Attempted grand larceny. Elder abuse laws apply here because you were incapacitated by medication, which puts you in a protected class during the event, and conspiracy to commit fraud." He looked at me. "How do you want to play this, Everly? We can go to the police right now. They will arrest them before dinner." I looked at the screen. I looked at the names. Marlene, Tessa, Grant. "No," I said. "If we arrest them, they become victims. Marlene will cry to the press. She will say she was a desperate mother trying to save her daughter's finances, and the big bad grandfather threw her in jail. She will play the martyr. Then what?" "We hit them where it actually hurts," I said. "We don't use handcuffs. We use the IRS." Walter smiled. It was the first time I had seen a genuine smile on his face in days. "Al Capone," he said. "Exactly," I said. "They didn't catch him for murder. They caught him because he couldn't explain his money." We spent the next 6 hours drafting the reports. We filed a formal fraud report with Crescent Ridge Bank, flagging every single transaction from the last 9 years as unauthorized coercion. We attached the affidavits. We attached the hospital video, but the masterpiece was the IRS whistleblower Form 211. We cataloged the income Marlene had received from me. $426,600. Here is the catch, Walter explained as we filled out the boxes. Marlene has never declared this money as income. She treats it as a gift from you. But gifts over a certain amount, $15,000 a year roughly, have to be reported, and the giver pays the tax. You never filed a gift tax return because you didn't think of it as a gift. You thought of it as theft. But she didn't report it either, I said. Right, Walter said. But here is where consulting hangs her. By funneling the money through a business account, and by paying Grant a consulting fee, she has created a paper trail that suggests this is business income. She is running a business. The business is being Everly's mother, and she hasn't paid a dime of tax on that revenue. We hit submit. The feeling was electric. It wasn't the heat of anger. It was the cool, clean sensation of a scalpel cutting out a tumor. That evening, my phone rang. It wasn't Marlene. It was Tessa. I hesitated, then put it on speaker so Walter could hear. Hello, Tessa? Everly? Her voice was shaky. She sounded like she had been crying. Oh my God, are you okay? Mom is going crazy. She's throwing things. She says the bank froze everything, even her personal checking account. That is what happens during a fraud investigation. Tessa, I said calmly. Investigation? Tessa squeaked. Everly, please, you have to stop this. Grant says he is going to lose his license. He says the Bar Association contacted him. Grant should have thought about that before he tried to fingerprint a sedated woman, I said. But what about me? Tessa sobbed. My card isn't working. I tried to buy gas, and it said, refer to issuer. I am stranded at a gas station. Everly, I have no money. Then get a job, Tessa, I said. How can you be so cruel? She wailed. We are family. Mom was just trying to help you manage things. She said you owe her this money. I froze. What did you say? She said you owe her, Tessa repeated, desperate to justify the madness. She said raising you cost a fortune. She said she sacrificed her 20s for you. She said the money you give her is just repayment. It is a debt. Everly. She says you are paying off your debt for existing. I looked at Walter. His eyes were wide. He nodded slowly. Is that so? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Yes, Tessa cried. So just unlock the accounts. Let us take what is ours, and we can all go back to normal. Please, just split the difference. Give us half. Goodbye, Tessa. I said. I hung up. Did you hear that? I asked Walter. I heard it, he said. She thinks it is a debt repayment. That is her narrative. Then let's get her to put it in writing, I said. I opened my text messages. I typed out a message to Marlene. I kept it simple. I kept it direct. I knew she was staring at her phone right now, watching her world burn, looking for any way to put out the fire. Tessa just called me. She says you believe I owe you this money for raising me. Is that true? I waited. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly. She was typing. Then she stopped. Then she typed again. She was angry. And when Marlene was angry, she was careless. The message came through. Of course it is true. Do you have any idea what childcare costs? Do you know what I spent on your braces? Your clothes? Your food? You think that was free? You are not giving me gifts. Everly, you are reimbursing me. It is a reimbursement for 18 years of labor. That money is mine. I earned it. I stared at the screen. She said the word, Walter whispered, leaning in. She said, reimbursing, and she said, labor, and she said, earned. She just admitted it is not a gift, I said. She just admitted it is a transaction, a fee for services rendered. And fees for services, Walter said, a wolfish grin spreading across his face. Our taxable income. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the cloud. I emailed it to Walter. I emailed it to the fraud investigator at the bank. And then I uploaded it as an addendum to the IRS whistleblower report we had just filed. Loan or gift, I whispered to the phone. You had two choices. Mom, if it was a gift, you are a thief. If it was a loan repayment or a fee, you are a tax evader. You just picked tax evader. Walter closed his laptop with a definitive snap. You know, he said, standing up and stretching his back. I used to worry that you were too soft, that Marlene had broken your spine. He looked down at me, and his eyes were full of a fierce, terrifying pride. I was wrong. She didn't break your spine. She just sharpened it. What happens now? I asked. Now? Walter picked up his thermos. Now we wait for the dominoes. The IRS moves slow, but when they arrive, they don't knock. They kick the door down. I lay back against the pillows. The pain was still there, but it felt different now. It was the pain of healing, the pain of setting a bone so it could grow back straight. I looked at the text message one last time. That money is mine. I earned it. No, Mom, I said to the silence of the room. You just spent your freedom. The days that followed the confrontation in the hospital room took on a distinct, rhythmic quality. It was not the rhythm of a healing body. Though my ribs were slowly knitting themselves back together and the bruising on my chest was fading from a violent purple to a sickly yellow, it was the rhythm of a demolition. From my hospital bed, I became a conductor of consequences. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply directed the flow of information. My grandfather, Walter, was my instrument, and the law was the music. We were dismantling the house of cards my mother had built, one legal notice at a time. The first domino to fall was the most predictable one. The Internal Revenue Service does not react with speed, but when they do react, they react with overwhelming mass. Because Walter and I had filed the whistleblower report alleging undeclared income and disguised employment, the automated flags in the system tripped hard. We received a notification that an audit had been triggered. It was not a random spot check. It was a comprehensive lifestyle audit. The agency had looked at the $426,000 of flow over 9 years, compared it to Marlene's tax returns, which showed near poverty-level income, and demanded an explanation for the discrepancy. Marlene did exactly what a guilty person does when the walls start closing in. She panicked. Walter tracked the movement through the alert system he had set up on the public records and the shared accounts we still had visibility on. She is liquidating, Walter told me on the morning of my 5th day in the hospital. He turned his laptop screen toward me. Look at this activity. Marlene was trying to sell her assets. She had listed 3 designer handbags on a luxury resale site. She had taken a diamond tennis bracelet, one I recognized as a birthday gift to herself 3 years ago paid for by my bonus check, to a high-end pawn shop in the city. She managed to get a check from the pawn shop for $4,200, but here was the beauty of the trap we had laid. When she tried to deposit that check into her personal account at Crescent Ridge Bank, the system rejected it. We had flagged her accounts for suspected fraud. The bank's risk algorithm saw a deposit attempt from a known high-risk customer whose accounts were under review for elder abuse and coercion, and it froze the transaction. I imagined her standing at the teller window, the same way she had stood at the airline counter. I imagined the teller telling her that her funds were under administrative hold. I imagined the scream that must have echoed through the lobby. She had the money in her hand, but she could not touch it. She was starving in a grocery store. Then came the fall of Grant Halverson. Grant thought he could walk away from the hospital room and distance himself. He thought if he just stopped answering Marlene's calls, the stain wouldn't spread to him. He was wrong. The complaint Walter filed with the State Bar Association included the video of him attempting to force a fingerprint signature from a sedated patient. But the real kill shot was the financial records from the M. Bacchus consulting account. The investigators didn't just see a lawyer helping a client. They saw a lawyer receiving a monthly stipend of $500 from a fraudulent business entity set up to siphon money from that same client's daughter. It looked like a kickback. It looked like money laundering. Walter came in after lunch with a grim satisfaction on his face. Grant has been placed on administrative leave by his firm, he said. And the state bar just opened a formal ethics inquiry. They are subpoenaing his emails. If they find one email where he advises Marlene on how to hide that money, he is done. He will be disbarred before Christmas. Grant Halverson had traded his career for a monthly retainer that cost less than a car payment. It was a pathetic end to a mediocre man. But the rot went deeper than just Marlene and Grant. It had infected Tessa too. I had always viewed my sister as a victim, a weaker version of myself who simply hadn't learned to say no. I thought she was collateral damage. But as we dug through the credit card statements attached to the sub-accounts, I realized Tessa was not a victim. She was an apprentice. We found a charge from 3 months ago. It was for a vacation rental deposit in Cabo San Lucas, $2,500. The receipt was digital, but it required a signature. The signature on the document read, Everly Fisher. I had never been to Cabo. I had never seen this rental agreement. She forged my name, I said, staring at the screen. The betrayal felt different than Marlene's. Marlene felt like a force of nature, a hurricane that destroyed everything in its path. Tessa felt like a termite, eating away at the foundation while pretending to be part of the house. It gets worse, Walter said. She used the authorized user card you gave her for emergencies to pay for it. She disputed the charge when the trip got canceled due to weather. But she had the refund sent to her personal Venmo account, not back to your card. She had stolen twice, once by using the card, and once by pocketing the refund. That is wire fraud, I said, and identity theft. She is 26 years old, Walter said. She knows right from wrong, or at least, she should. We added it to the pile. We sent the documentation to the fraud department. We did not call the police on Tessa directly, but we fed the evidence into the machine that was already eating the family alive. Then, just when I thought they were completely pinned down, Marlene launched her counterattack. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was scheduled to be discharged the next day. A process server knocked on the door of my hospital room. He looked apologetic, likely because of the bandages and the IV stand next to me. Everly Fisher? He asked. Yes. He handed me a thick envelope. Served. I opened it. My hands were steady now. I was inoculated against shock. It was an emergency petition for temporary guardianship of a minor. Marlene was suing for custody of Miles. I read the affidavit attached to the petition. The words swam before my eyes, toxic and twisted. She claimed that my erratic behavior regarding family finances was a symptom of severe post-traumatic stress and potential opioid dependency resulting from the accident. She claimed I was mentally unstable and paranoid, citing my refusal to see family and my delusional accusations of theft. She argued that Miles was in danger under my care because I was cut off from family support and financially insolvent. She was trying to take my son. She knew she couldn't get the money anymore, so she went for the only thing that mattered more than the money. She wanted leverage. She thought if she had Miles, I would open the checkbook again to get him back. It was a kidnapping disguised as a legal motion. For a moment, the old fear gripped me. The fear of the little girl who was told she wasn't good enough, the fear that she was all-powerful. Then I looked at Walter. He wasn't scared. He looked furious. She really did it, he said softly. She actually crossed the line. She wants a war, I said, my voice cold. She thinks I am weak because I am in a hospital bed. She thinks I am the same girl who used to cry when she yelled at me. I picked up my phone. Call Miles's father. My ex-husband and I had our differences. We had divorced because we were young and wanted different things, but we respected each other, and more importantly, he loathed Marlene. He had banned her from his house years ago after she tried to criticize his parenting. I got him on speakerphone. Mark, I said, Marlene just filed for emergency custody of Miles. She is claiming I am a drug addict and brain damaged. There was a silence on the line. Then, a sound I didn't expect. Mark laughed. It was a dark, angry laugh. Is she insane? Mark asked. Miles is with me. He's watching cartoons. He is perfectly safe, and you are the most stable person I know, even with broken ribs. I need a statement. Mark, I need you to tell the court that Miles is safe, that you have physical custody right now, and that you vehemently oppose any contact with Marlene Kincaid. Consider it done, Mark said. I will drive to the courthouse myself. I will bring the school records showing he has perfect attendance. I will bring the pediatrician's notes. Everly, she is not getting near him, over my dead body. We hung up. I looked at Walter. We need more, Walter said. We need to prove that this isn't about Miles. We need to prove this is retaliation. He reached into his leather briefcase, the one that had been sitting in the corner of the room for days. He pulled out a file I had never seen before. It was old, battered, with coffee stains on the cover. It was labeled simply, Kincaid/Fisher, Notes. What is that? I asked. I call it the family file, Walter said. He placed it on the bed. I started it the year you turned 19, the year you moved out and she called you crying because she couldn't pay the electric bill. I opened the file. It was a chronicle of abuse. Walter had written down everything, every date, every amount, every frantic phone call I had made to him. June 12, 2014. Marlene demanded Everly pay for car repairs. Everly borrowed money from student loans. Marlene bought a new dress 2 days later. October 3rd, 2016. Everly crying. Marlene told her she was a burden. Everly transferred $600. August 21st, 2019. Marlene asked Everly to co-sign a lease. I advised against it. Everly did it anyway after Marlene threatened suicide. Page after page, year after year. It wasn't just numbers. It was a psychological profile of a predator grooming her prey. It showed the pattern of manipulation. The love bombing followed by the crisis, followed by the extraction of funds, followed by the cold shoulder. This proves she doesn't want to protect Miles, Walter said. This proves she views children as financial assets. This establishes a history of using emotional leverage to extort money. No family court judge in the state will give a child to a woman with this file. We submitted the response the next morning. It was a heavy document. It included Mark's affidavit, the hospital toxicity screen proving I was only on prescribed medication, the letter from Miles's school confirming his stability, and the redacted summary of Walter's family file. The ruling came down via email 48 hours later. Motion for emergency guardianship denied. The court finds no evidence of immediate danger to the minor child. The court further notes the concerning allegations of financial impropriety against the petitioner. She had lost. She had swung her biggest weapon, and it had shattered against the wall of evidence we had built. But the final blow, the one that truly signaled the end of her reign, arrived not from the court, but from the county recorder's office. Marlene lived in a condo that she prided herself on. It was her status symbol. She always bragged about the view, but she had leveraged it to the hilt, refinancing it twice to pay for her lifestyle, using the equity like an ATM. Because of the IRS investigation, and because the bank had confirmed the fraud report regarding the unauthorized consulting business, the tax authorities moved faster than usual. They saw a taxpayer who was liquidating assets and had a massive undisclosed income liability. They moved to secure their interest. My phone pinged with a notification from the property monitoring service Walter had set up. Alert, new lien recorded. Property, 12 Oakwood Drive, Unit 4B, claimant, Internal Revenue Service, type, federal tax lien, amount, to be determined. I stared at the screen. A tax lien meant she couldn't sell the condo. She couldn't refinance it. She couldn't borrow against it. It was effectively frozen. And since she had no cash flow, because I had cut the cord, and the bank had frozen her checking account, she couldn't pay the mortgage. The condo was dead in the water. It was only a matter of months before foreclosure. I looked up at Walter. He was packing his bag. We were leaving the hospital in an hour. She is homeless, I said. The realization was stark. Or she will be soon. She has options, Walter said, not looking up. She can get a job. She can sell her clothes. She can learn to live within her means. He paused and looked at me. She has the same options you had when you were 22 and eating ramen noodles so she could drink wine. I nodded. He was right. Marlene had spent decades building a life on a foundation of other people's money. She had treated me like a load-bearing wall, hammering away at me, assuming I would never crack, but I had cracked. And when the wall came down, the roof came with it. I closed the iPad. The investigation was running itself now. The dominoes were clicking against each other, a satisfying, chaotic sound of collapse. Marlene was trapped in a cage of her own making, built from the very receipts she had forced me to pay. "Ready to go?" Walter asked. "Yes," I said. "Take me to see my son." 18 months is a strange amount of time. It is long enough for a broken rib to calcify into something stronger than it was before. But it is barely enough time to heal a mind that has been systematically dismantled for 3 decades. I spent the first 6 months of my new life waiting for the other shoe to drop. I would wake up in my new apartment, a quiet, sun-drenched place on the other side of the city, far from the reach of Marlene's usual haunts, and check my bank account. I did it before I brushed my teeth. I did it before I kissed Miles awake. I expected to see the zero. I expected to see the overdraft fee. I expected to see the red text of doom. But morning after morning, the number remained steady. In fact, it grew. It was a terrifying realization that without the hemorrhage of my mother's lifestyle, I was actually good with money. I wasn't the financial disaster she had always told me I was. I was just a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and I had finally patched the hole. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Eris. She specialized in enmeshment trauma during our 3rd session. She told me something that changed the way I looked at the past. She said I wasn't just a daughter. I was a cult member of one. "You are deprogramming, Everly," she said. "You were raised to believe that your survival depended on her happiness. That is not love. That is a hostage situation." So, I did the work. I rewired the circuit board. When the guilt came, that sharp electric jolt telling me I was a bad daughter for eating a nice dinner while my mother was likely struggling, I learned to acknowledge the signal and then disconnect the wire. I learned that no was not an attack, it was a boundary. While I was building, the Kincaid empire was crumbling. It didn't happen with a bang, it happened with a whimper, delivered via digital notifications I had long since silenced. Marlene went through stages of grief, but they were distorted by her narcissism. First came the arrogance. In the early months, she sent emails from new accounts, bypassing my blocks. They were short and imperious. "You are making a mistake. You will need me one day. When you come crawling back, the price will be double." I deleted them without reading past the first line. Then came the bargaining. This coincided with the tax lien officially locking down her condo. "Everly, let us be reasonable. If you just release the hold on the MK consulting funds, I can pay off the IRS. We can fix this. I will forgive you." I forwarded those directly to the fraud investigator at the bank. Then came the threats. "I will go to the press. I will tell them you abandoned your sick mother. I will sue you for elder neglect." Walter and I laughed at those. You cannot sue someone for neglect when you are 56 years old, able-bodied, and simply refusing to get a job. And finally, about a year in, came the despair. It was a voicemail left on my work line at 3 a.m. Her voice was slurred. She sounded small. "I am hungry. Evie, the fridge is empty. They turned off the power today. Just $50. Please." I sat in my office at Astorvale MedTech, listening to the woman who had drained nearly $500,000 from me beg for 50. It would have been so easy to send it. One click, one transfer. The old programming screamed at me to save her, but then I looked at the photo of Miles on my desk. I looked at the brochure for the summer science camp I had just paid for in full, something I never could have afforded 2 years ago. I did not send the money. Instead, I sent her a link to the local food bank and the number for social services. I did not do it to be cruel. I did it because giving an addict cash is not help. It is a death sentence. And Marlene was addicted to my resources. The silence that followed that text was the first real peace I had known in my life. But the law was not silent. The law was grinding forward, chewing up everyone who had been part of the conspiracy. Tessa was the first to feel the cold steel of reality. It happened at a shopping mall in the suburbs. My sister, who had always believed that consequences were things that happened to other people, tried to buy a designer handbag using an old credit card. It was a secondary card linked to one of the accounts I had frozen, but she had kept the physical plastic, assuming she could slip a transaction through the cracks. She didn't know that the card wasn't just declined. It was flagged as stolen/fraudulent use in the banking system. I got the call from the precinct. "Is this Everly Fisher?" the officer asked. "We have your sister, Tessa Kincaid, in custody for credit card fraud and attempting to use a canceled financial instrument." "I see," I said. I was standing in my kitchen, making a sandwich for Miles. "She is listing you as her bail contact," the officer said. "She is hysterical. Ma'am, she says you will clear this up." I imagined Tessa in a holding cell. I imagined her shock that her tears weren't working on the police sergeant. "I cannot clear it up," I said calmly. "The card was reported stolen and unauthorized 18 months ago. If she used it, she committed a crime. I am not posting bail." "Understood," the officer said. He sounded almost relieved not to have to deal with the family drama. "We will process her." I hung up. I took a bite of my sandwich. It tasted excellent. Grant Halverson fell shortly after. His demise was bureaucratic and dull, which was fitting for a man of his caliber. The State Bar Association completed their ethics probe. They found that he had not only accepted the monthly consulting fees from Marlene, but he had also drafted the legal documents for the MEK Consulting Shell Company, knowing full well it had no legitimate business operations. He wasn't just a bad lawyer, he was a co-conspirator. I received a copy of the final ruling via email. License suspended indefinitely, pending criminal review. He lost his firm. He lost his standing. Last I heard, he was managing a car rental branch near the airport, renting compact sedans to tourists who had no idea he used to wear Italian suits. But the investigation wasn't done with me yet. 18 months after the accident, I received a summons to the federal building. It wasn't for an audit. It was for a witness interview. I went with Walter. He walked slower now, his cane taking more of his weight, but his mind was still a steel trap. We sat in a conference room with a special agent named Miller. He had a stack of files that looked like a skyscraper on the table. "Ms. Fisher," Agent Miller said, "we are finalizing the case against Marlene Kincaid regarding the tax evasion and the unreported income, but we found something else." My stomach tightened. "What?" "In 2021, your mother applied for a refinancing loan on her condo, the one she is currently losing." "I know," I said. "She got approved. I assumed she lied about her consulting income." "She did," Agent Miller said, "but she also lied about her rental income." He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a lease agreement. I looked at it. It was a standard residential lease. It listed Marlene Kincaid as the landlord and Everly Fisher as the tenant. It stated that I, Everly Fisher, was paying her $3,200 a month in rent to live in her second bedroom. "I never lived there," I said, my voice rising. "I have had my own apartment since I was 22. I have my own lease to prove it." "We know," Agent Miller said. "And the signature on this lease does not match your handwriting. It matches hers." I stared at the document. She hadn't just taken my money. She had used my name to build a fake revenue stream to trick a bank into lending her more money. Money that she likely spent on clothes and trips. "This is bank fraud," Walter said. "Federal bank fraud. Using a false document to secure a loan." "Correct," Agent Miller said. "It adds a significant mandatory minimum to the sentencing guidelines, but we needed you to confirm you never paid rent." "I paid her," I said, feeling a bitter laugh bubble up. "I paid her hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it wasn't rent, it was extortion." "But there was no rental agreement?" "Never. Thank you," Agent Miller said. He closed the file. "That is the final piece. We are moving to indictment next week." Walking out of the federal building, the city air felt crisp. It was autumn. The leaves were turning gold and red, the same colors as the blood and fire that had started this whole mess. I looked at Walter. We sat on a bench near a fountain. "She is going to prison, isn't she?" I asked. "For a few years, likely," Walter said. "The tax evasion was bad. The bank fraud is worse. The judges don't like it when you lie to lenders." I looked at my hands. They were the same hands that used to shake when her name appeared on my phone. They were steady now. "I don't feel happy," I admitted. "I thought I would feel victorious, but I just feel blank." "That is called peace," Walter said. "It isn't exciting. It is just quiet." He looked at me, his gray eyes piercing through the afternoon light. "You are never going to get those 9 years back. Everly, you are never going to get the $400,000 back. That money is gone, burned on vanity and lies." He pointed his cane at the horizon. "But you have the next 40 years. And more importantly, you have the right to define who you are. You are not her ATM. You are not her retirement plan. You are just Everly." "Just Everly," I repeated. It sounded good. It sounded like enough. We drove back to my new house. It was a small bungalow with a porch and a yard for miles. It wasn't grand, but I owned it. My name was on the deed. My name was on the mortgage, and there were no authorized users. As we walked up the driveway, I saw the mail carrier leaving. He gave a friendly wave. I opened the mailbox. It was mostly junk mail, flyers for pizza, a catalog for gardening supplies. But at the bottom of the stack, there was a heavy white envelope. It had a window on the front. The return address was in the upper left corner. Printed in severe, official black ink, Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, Whistleblower Office. My heart skipped a beat. Walter saw me stop. He looked at the envelope in my hand. He knew exactly what it was. We had filed the Form 211 nearly 18 months ago. The law states that a whistleblower who provides specific, credible information that leads to the recovery of unpaid taxes is entitled to a percentage of the collected amount. They had seized the condo. They had seized the jewelry. They had seized the hidden accounts. They had collected. I held the envelope. It felt thick. It felt like an answer to a question I hadn't dared to ask. "Is that it?" Walter asked softly. "I think so," I said. "Well," Walter said, leaning against the porch railing, "you help them catch a criminal. It seems fair they pay you a consulting fee." I looked at the envelope, then at the front door of my house where Miles's scooter was parked. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The nightmare was over. Marlene was facing an indictment. Grant was renting cars. Tessa was dealing with a criminal record. And I was standing on my own front porch, holding a letter from the United States government that promised a new beginning. I took a deep breath, slid my thumb under the flap of the envelope, and prepared to see just how much the truth was worth. My thumb slid under the sealed flap of the envelope. The paper felt heavy, textured, the kind of stationery used for documents that change lives. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a familiar sensation, but for the first time in 9 years, it was not a rhythm of fear. It was a rhythm of anticipation. I pulled out the letter. Attached to the front was a check. It was green, printed with the intricate, secure watermarks of the United States Treasury. I stared at the numbers. It was not a fortune. It was not enough to retire on. It was not even close to the $426,000 that had been siphoned out of my life over the last decade. But that did not matter. The check was made out to Everly Fisher in the amount of $38,740. $38,740. This was my portion of the recovered assets. This was the whistleblower award. The IRS had seized Marlene's accounts. They had placed a lien on her condo, and they had likely garnished whatever liquid cash she had tried to hide. And from that seizure, they had carved out a slice for the person who turned on the light in the dark room. I looked at Walter. He was watching me, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Is it enough?" he asked. It is plenty, I said. It is exactly enough to start over. But the money was just the punctuation mark. The real story was written in the silence that followed. Over the next few weeks, the final pieces of the Kincaid empire did not just fall, they disintegrated. It was a slow-motion collapse that I watched from a distance, feeling a strange detachment, like watching a controlled demolition of a building that had been condemned for years. The condo on Oakwood Drive, the one Marlene had used to look down on the rest of the world, was put up for auction. It wasn't a dignified sale, it was a distressed asset liquidation. The bank and the IRS fought over the proceeds, and in the end, there was nothing left for Marlene. Her equity had been eaten alive by penalties and interest. I drove by it once, just to see. There was a sign on the lawn that said, "Foreclosure sale." The curtains I had paid for were still in the window, looking dusty and tired. Tessa, true to her nature, did not go down with the ship. When the pressure from the credit card fraud charges mounted, she did what parasites always do. She found a new host to feed on, or in this case, a host to sacrifice. She cut a deal. To avoid a felony record that would have ruined her social life, Tessa agreed to cooperate with the state bar's investigation into Grant Halverson. She sat in a deposition room and sang. She told them everything. She told them how Grant had coached Marlene to structure the consulting fees. She told them how Grant had prepared the fake lease agreement to defraud the bank. She told them how he had instructed them to get my fingerprint while I was sedated. Tessa walked away with probation and a hefty fine that she would likely spend the next decade trying to pay off. But Grant was finished. The last I heard, Grant Halverson had been indicted on charges of conspiracy to commit bank fraud and aiding and abetting tax evasion. His license to practice law was permanently revoked. The man who had stood in my hospital room, wearing a $3,000 suit and sneering at my rights, was now looking at a future where he would be lucky to get a job managing a shift at a fast food franchise. The silence from Marlene lasted for 3 weeks after the indictment, and then, inevitably, she appeared. It was a Tuesday evening. I was watering the hydrangeas in the front yard of my new house. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. I heard a car pull up. It wasn't her luxury sedan. It was an older model, rusted around the wheel wells, the kind of car she used to make fun of people for driving. Marlene got out. She looked diminished. That is the only word for it. The woman who had terrified me for 33 years, who had seemed 10 feet tall and made of steel, looked fragile. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, showing the gray roots she used to hide so religiously. Her clothes were expensive but ill-fitting, hanging loosely on a frame that had lost weight from stress. She walked up the driveway. She stopped 10 feet away from me. She didn't cross the property line. Maybe she knew I would call the police. Maybe she just didn't have the energy to invade anymore. "Everly," she said. Her voice was raspy. I put down the hose. I didn't turn it off. I just let it run into the grass, the water soaking into the earth. "Marlene," I said. "I lost the condo," she said. She wasn't yelling. She was stating a fact. "They came and changed the locks yesterday. I am staying at a motel on Route 9. I nodded. I heard, "I am going to prison, Evie," she said. Her voice cracked. "My lawyer, the public defender, he says the evidence is overwhelming. He says I should plead out. They are going to put me away for 18 months, maybe 2 years. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. "I am 56 years old. I can't go to prison." I stood there, feeling the cool evening air on my skin. I searched inside myself for the pity I used to feel. I searched for the guilt. I searched for the daughter who would have pulled out a checkbook and tried to fix it, but the cupboard was bare. There was nothing left. "Why?" she asked. It was a whisper. "Why did you do it? Why did you burn it all down?" I just wanted us to have a good life." "No," I said calmly. "You wanted to have a good life. I was just the fuel." "I am your mother," she cried out, a flash of the old anger sparking in her eyes. "I raised you. I fed you. I gave up my life for you. Doesn't that count for anything? Doesn't that earn me a little grace? She took a step forward. I just wanted to live easy. Everly, is that a crime? To want to live easy? I reached into the pocket of my gardening apron. I had been carrying a piece of paper with me for weeks. Knowing this moment would come, it was a photocopy. I walked to the edge of the grass and held it out to her. She looked at it. It was a screenshot of the text message she had sent me the day I confronted Tessa. You are not giving me gifts. Everly, you are reimbursing me. It is a reimbursement for 18 years of labor. That money is mine. I earned it. Below the screenshot, Walter and I had printed a simple spreadsheet. It showed the total amount of money transferred over 9 years. $426,600. You asked if wanting to live easy is a crime, I said. It isn't, but lying about how you pay for it is. I pointed to the paper in her hand. Here is the problem. Mom, you are trapped, and you trapped yourself with that text message. She stared at the paper, her hands shaking. If that money was a gift, as you told the bank when you applied for your loans, then you had no right to demand it, I said. And claiming it was yours to take makes you a thief. I took a step closer. But if that money was a reimbursement for labor, as you told me in that text message, then it is income. It is a fee for services rendered. Raising a child is not a billable job. Mom, but you tried to make it one. I looked her dead in the eye. So, I have one question for you, the same question I asked Tessa. I paused, letting the silence stretch out, letting the weight of the 9 years settle on her shoulders. Was it a loan, or was it a gift? Marlene opened her mouth, then she closed it. She realized the trap. If she said it was a gift, she was admitting that she had no legal claim to it, and that her attempts to force me to sign the papers in the hospital were attempted theft. It would destroy her defense in the fraud trial. If she said it was a loan repayment or earned income, she was confessing to the tax evasion charges. She was admitting she hid nearly $500,000 of income from the government. There was no third door. There was no exit. Her mouth worked soundlessly. The mother mask slipped completely, and underneath, I saw the panic of a con artist who had run out of road. You can't do this, she whispered. I already did, I said. The IRS has that text message, the bank has that text message, and now, you have it. I turned off the hose. Go home, Marlene, I said. Or go to the motel. I don't care where you go. But you cannot stay here. I have no money, she sobbed. I have nothing. You have your choices, I said. You made them every day for 9 years. Now you get to keep them. She stood there for a long time. I turned my back on her and walked toward the porch. I didn't look back. I listened to the sound of her footsteps retreating down the driveway. I listened to the car door open and close. I listened to the engine sputter to life and drive away, when the sound of her car faded into the distance. I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. It was the final brick of the wall coming down. I walked inside. The house was warm. It smelled of dinner cooking. Miles was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing a picture of a dinosaur. Walter was sitting in the armchair, reading a book. I walked over to the counter where the check from the Treasury was sitting. $38,740. I picked it up. Walter, I said. He looked up over his reading glasses. I am going to the bank tomorrow, I said. I am putting $5,000 into an emergency fund. Real emergency fund, not a hammock. Walter nodded. Smart. And the rest, I said, looking at Miles, who was humming to himself as he colored a T-Rex purple, is going into a 529 college savings plan. For him. Also smart, Walter said. I looked at the check again. It wasn't blood money anymore. It was seed money. It was the foundation of a life where love wasn't a transaction. I realized then that for the last 18 months, I had been mourning the loss of my family. I had felt like an orphan, but standing there, in a house I paid for, with a son I adored and a grandfather who had saved me, I realized the truth. I hadn't lost a family. I had never really had one to begin with. I had a payroll department. I had a board of directors who viewed me as a resource. Cutting them off wasn't a tragedy, it was a restructuring. I walked over to Miles and kissed the top of his head. He smelled like crayons and shampoo. "Hey, Mom," he said, looking up. "Look, I drew us, and Grandpa Walter, and we are in a fortress. It is a beautiful fortress. Baby," I said. I looked at Walter. He winked. They had tried to break me. They had tried to turn a car accident into a payday. They had looked at my broken body and seen a PIN code, but they had forgotten the most important rule of accounting. Eventually, the books have to balance, and as I stood there, safe in my own home, free from the debt of their expectations, I knew the ledger was finally clean. They wanted to turn my accident into an opportunity, but my grandfather only needed one move, and their greed paid the price for my freedom. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Monica Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from and what time it is in your part of the world. Let's chat in the comments below. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people.